Joining us now is Paul McKeever. He is the leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario, and he's running for office in the riding of London West. Welcome to TVO.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Good to see you again, Paul. You're one of those folks who's written me numerous emails over the years telling me how to do my job better.
You got it.
And I appreciate the emails. Freedom Party. A lot of people don't know what it is. What is it?
Well, it's a party that thinks that we're not getting value for the dollars we're paying, and that we're not getting choice in some areas that we need to have it in order to improve services, so healthcare and education in particular.
Is that a dramatically different message from, say, the Libertarian Party?
Oh, yes. The Libertarian Party is largely, from what I've seen, sort of a social group that sits around talking about libertarian writers, and we're much more practical than that, and more incremental, I would say.
But you both talk about getting the government out of people's lives and having the government be much less responsible for the choices people make in their lives. So to that extent, is there not a potential meeting of the minds?
If you wanted to get philosophical, we could. I guess the other thing that we really object to in libertarianism is the whole moral relativism that founds the movement, and we're very much in favor of a party that has as its guiding principle the idea that there's reality and reason and self that should guide political decisions, not just if it feels good, do it. So
let's go through some of the issues. I read your platform.
Right.
You are the only party running for office, I think, that wants to eliminate the provincial income tax.
Correct.
That is a tax that brings in $20–25 billion a year to the provincial coffers. What would we do if we eliminated the income tax?
Well, the income tax was introduced in 1969, and it was introduced in order to pay for a brand new government health monopoly, the OHIP system.
Medicare.
That's right. And at the same time, the Progressive Conservatives banned private alternatives. So what we're really saying is, let's reverse that decision. That was done in 1 year. Let's give people choice whether they want to buy OHIP or whether they prefer a private option like Blue Cross or even paying as they go. But of course, you can't have a choice if the government's still got your money. So just as the government decided to impose a tax to pay for OHIP, which was mandatory, as soon as you make OHIP no longer mandatory, you have to make sure that you no longer make the payment for OHIP mandatory. And so we're saying, okay, well, the chief way to finance OHIP in the province still is various forms of income taxation, and that's why we're saying, well, those would have to go back, or else choice would be illusory.
Well, we have a health premium as well, in addition to the income tax. Is this really doable?
Oh, well, I mean, anything that can be done in 1 year, as it was in 1969, can be undone in 1 year.
But we're almost 40 years down this road now.
Right, and look how bad it is. I mean, we have people waiting in these long lines for service, suffering, even dying, according to the Supreme Court of Canada. I mean, surely that decision was made in Quebec, but the context is such that we can easily extrapolate and say that it's applicable in Ontario as well. In fact, some of the dicta from that decision suggest that they were really talking about the broader Canadian context when we're talking about Medicare. And the decision there was that, look, if you can't provide service when you're forcing people to pay for it, then you no longer get to have your monopoly, and there can be private alternatives. And that's what they've been forced in Quebec to do, to lose their monopoly, and I think that's the appropriate decision here in Ontario as well.
Well, I don't have to tell you that Medicare is like the third rail of Canadian politics.
Absolutely.
You touch it and you die.
Yeah.
You touch it at your peril, let's put it that way.
Sure.
You're kind of messing with a state religion here in some respects. People may not like certain aspects of the healthcare system, but it's almost part of the definition of being a Canadian is loving Medicare. You want to mess with that.
Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, statistically, it's not even true. We have numerous polls, even National Post, giving very high percentages of people who would like to see private alternatives not only in delivery, but in the insurance of health. So, I mean, we're not talking 1 and 3 and 5%. We're talking 40 and 50% support for investigating private alternatives, both to insurance and to the delivery of services.
Do you think people really understand that?
Well, I think that they're not allowed to discuss it very much in the public. I mean, the third rail, I think, is more a political phenomenon, perhaps even a media phenomenon, than a phenomenon found amongst the people. I mean, people talk about healthcare and how poor it is all of the time, but in the media and in any party that is, sort of acting on the principle of let's avoid a loss rather than let's pursue a gain, they will just avoid the topic. We've seen that with Frank Cleese for the Progressive Conservatives when he ran for the leadership of the Progressive Conservatives. That was the lightning strike, which although...
He talked about bringing in user fees, was what you're referring to.
Well, he talked about parallel private health care. And that's similar to what we're saying, except that we would allow choice between two systems rather than making everyone pay for OHIP plus having them pay for private
Well,
sector.
play it out. Play it out. There's 13 million Ontarians. How many people would you imagine would avail themselves of the opportunity that you're offering and take a tax cut, not pay the health premium, opt out of Medicare, and go a different way?
I think if you look at statistically around the world, the German system gives you choice between the public and the private alternatives. You have to choose early in life so that you're not, investing late in life in a private system or in the public system. But there, I think the statistics are about 90% of people choose to stay with the state-run, price-controlled system, and about 10% avail themselves of private alternatives. So all we're saying is give people the choice, just like they have in Germany and most other countries of the world.
In the United States, where they have a system that obviously has significantly more private sector involvement, I don't hear very many people in Canada saying we ought to take that system over our system. That instead of the government making the decisions about who gets what, it's insurance companies who make the decisions about who gets what. So how are we further ahead under your system?
Well, that's a very good point, because we're not suggesting the American system either. The American system's flaw is that the government does involve itself. In particular, what it says is that if you're an insurance company, we've been lobbied as politicians to make sure that we pass laws forcing you to ensure that your coverage includes, chiropractic care or physiotherapy or eyeglasses. And so, in other words, you have policies that can't be broken down to just the parts that people want. When they buy, the catastrophic care, they're forced to buy insurance for sniffles, for, sore backs, for itchy skin. And as a result, the premiums skyrocket. And it's all politically driven, of course, because all of the various lobbies providing these various lesser services, these less catastrophic services, are funding the campaigns of politicians in the United States and saying, pass a law forcing insurance companies to cover these things so that we'll have a certain cash flow. And that's not something we're in favor of. We're in favor of the opposite, and that is give the insurer full liberal choice to offer any form of coverage that is demanded by their customer, and give the customer the power to choose. Don't make a customer purchase, skin care, health insurance if all they really want is insurance to cover their triple bypass should they need one.
You talk about customers, though.
Yeah.
Medicare talks about citizens who are insured.
Right.
There's a philosophical difference, right, from where you're coming from versus the status quo.
No, it's a semantic difference. I mean, we're all forced to be customers of the OHIP system. We're forced because we have to pay this provincial sales tax since 1969. But, I mean, let's be clear.
Provincial income tax.
Sorry, the provincial income tax, yes. But, I mean, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And all we really did in 1969 was not say, oh, guess what, you don't have to pay for health care. We're still paying for health care. We're still the customers. We're still the patients. It's just that we're no longer calling the tune because the bag of gold is being held by the government. And so the healthcare providers have to respond not to the patient and to their satisfaction needs, but to the satisfaction of elected officials who say, look, put more emphasis on knee and hip replacements because we're getting some heat. Don't worry about the fact that this guy's dying of something else. That's not getting the press right now.
That's democracy. The politicians are responding to the demands they get on them from the constituents.
That's right. But it's a complete and utter violation of every individual's life and liberty.
Okay, let's talk some education. If people think your health care is controversial, your education policy is controversial as well. You are proposing, if people are going to enjoy this very large tax cut that you're suggesting, they got to pay for education directly. How would this work?
Well, right now, education is financed primarily through property taxes. One of the things that we're proposing is that the property tax is not a good way to finance municipal services or education for that matter. And so we're proposing that the property tax be replaced at the municipal level with a sales tax. Now, along with that, we're saying that there's no need to fund education through taxes. In fact, that's the problem. Right now we have the Liberals saying, well, because it's funded by taxes, we all have to be in one big happy system. Everyone should be forced to either join the public system, send their kids to the public system, or pay extra to send them to some other school. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are saying, let's have the taxpayer now start paying for a range of private religious schools. We're saying, look, yes to choice, but no to somebody paying to a school that their child doesn't attend. That's where the unfairness is. In one parent paying to a school that his or her child does not attend. So we're just saying make sure that the parent has the choice to direct their own money to the school their child does attend, and let the parent, the person who is charged with taking care of this child, be the one paying the piper so that they'll be the ones calling the tune. I go to school. My child's in a split-level grade 3. The principal says to me, I'd like to help you, but then other parents would want choice too. And I have to worry about the unions. This is not a joke. This is what I'm told. Now that's unacceptable. I'm paying either through rent, a portion of my rent through, to the landlord, or through property taxes directly, for a school system that teaches my child. And instead I'm being told, well, I'm sorry, but you're going to get half a teacher because half of her time is going to be spent teaching grade 2 and the other teaching grade 3. And that's because Dalton McGuinty said he'd keep class sizes low, and the only way we can do that is with split levels. And we also have the worries of the union. I want them to be worried about what I think. And the only way they're going to be worried about what I think is if I'm the one making the payments.
What do we owe each other?
We owe each other justice. In other words, we should be getting what we pay for, and we should be paying for what we get. But we should be paying only for what we get, and we should be getting only what we pay for. Education is, again, a perfect example. With the Liberals, they would say, well, you should pay for it whether or not you get it. Whether or not you send your child to the public system, you should be paying for the public system.
Just, I think in fairness, the theory is that we're paying to build, bus systems in Sudbury because the people in Sudbury are paying to build hospitals in Toronto, and everybody's sort of chipping in for everybody else.
Right.
You don't like that idea?
I think that people who want to ride a bus should pay for the services that they consume. I'm not riding the bus all the time. I pay for the bus when I do ride the bus.
Gets back to my question.
Right.
What do we owe each other?
I think we owe each other justice, and that's all we owe each other.
What does that mean? Just justice and that's it?
We owe each other respect for one another's life, liberty, and property, and that means that we don't turn each other into a source of living. In other words, if we have things that we'd like to use, consume, enjoy in life, we have to have responsibility enough to pursue or take the actions necessary to purchase those things ourselves. It's not to say that you can't choose to help people out. There's nothing wrong with charity. But when charity comes at the point of a gun, that's no longer kindness. That's theft.
Paul, I want to show you some numbers that I'm sure you're well aware of.
Sure.
Michael, if we can, let's bring these up and you can look at the monitor over my shoulder here. In the last 5 elections in the province of Ontario, I don't think the Freedom Party has managed to hit more than 0.2% of the total votes cast.
Right.
And in 2003, actually it's your highest total in the last 5 elections, but still, in a province of 13 million people, we're talking about fewer than 10,000 votes. The question is, why do this? You're obviously not going to win any seats. You're not going to be the next Premier of Ontario. Mm-hmm. Why do this?
I think that rationality needs a voice, and I don't think we're seeing a lot of it. Right now, all of the 3 parties that we're seeing in the legislature are proposing that if enough people vote in favor of it, well then that's the definition of what's good and right. And the Freedom Party takes a different view. We say, look, the French Enlightenment had it right, that reality and reason are the things that government ought to be using when deciding how to use its force appropriately. And we don't see that. And I would contest your position. In fact, I know, that we're going to see, as the population starts to see parties like Freedom Party on YouTube, on these various archived radio and TV broadcasts, that people are going to finally see. I was at a debate yesterday, 200 to 400 children, actually most of them turning into adults, at a high school. And there were 3 of us on stage, the Liberal, the PC, and myself. I not only was cheered, I had a standing ovation, and I sat down beside the now Minister of Universities, who could only sit there in awe and say, under his breath, to me, excellent. And there was a reason for that, and that's because we told people in plain language that they ought to be getting what they pay for and that they're not getting it. And when people in the Liberal and the Conservative camps try and play the old money comes from nowhere, or don't worry, we're going to give you this, that, and the other, and it's not going to cost you a penny, Freedom Party, through video, we have the most popular videos on YouTube, 4 times more popular than the Progressives, Conservatives, and the Liberals. 4 times. We don't have advertising budgets. We're just there. And people come to us because they like what we say, not because they know who we are.
They may like what you say, but they're not voting for you.
That's only because the number one factor in voting so far has been, well, I just want to push out the guy who's in there, and to do that I'm going to use the party that's the second biggest. So, that's the sort of hammerhead approach to voting. We don't ascribe to that, and we know that most Ontarians, if given the opportunity to see that somebody represents other views than the ones they see in the Liberal and Conservative camps, will start saying, you know what, it's time for revolution. Now, saying that with the Liberals and Conservatives in place, we're going to win a government. But I'll tell you this, the Conservatives are making themselves rather redundant. And I think when they fall, that's when a new party emerges. And we're making sure that we're ready for that time. There is no other party like Freedom Party in Ontario right now promoting lower taxes and a better life. There's no one uttering the word private sector competition except Freedom Party.
Do you know why?
Yes, the ghost of Mike Harris. And as soon as everybody gets over that, and that's coming soon, because socialism can only work itself into a hole, people will be saying, you know what, it's time to do what we did in '95. It's time to look for a tax-cutting party rather than one that's promising us more freebies.
Paul McKeever, it's good of you to join us today in TVO. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.